You have been taught that the early Christian church, from its very genesis, spoke with a unified voice, a singular truth passed down from the apostles. But what if you were told that this is a meticulously crafted illusion? What if the very foundations of the faith you understand were built upon a deliberate suppression of revelations deemed too radical, too powerful, to be permitted into the hallowed canon? Imagine yourself transported to the arid deserts of Upper Egypt, to a time not so long ago, December of 1945. You are an Arab peasant digging for fertilizer near the cliffs of Jabal al-Tarif when your shovel strikes not rock, but something unexpected, a large, sealed earthenware jar. Your heart pounds. This is not just pottery. This is a vessel from another age, holding secrets that have been buried for 16 centuries. You carefully break it open, and within you find not gold or jewels, but 13 bound papyrus codices, ancient books, their fragile pages inscribed with forgotten words in a language now rare and ancient to your ears. Coptic. This single, extraordinary discovery is about to ignite a firestorm in the world of biblical scholarship, tearing away the pretense of a monolithic early Christianity and revealing a tapestry of belief far richer and far more contentious than you ever imagined. So, as we prepare to uncover these timeless truths, if you find value in this journey, consider leaving a like to support the channel. It makes a huge difference. Share your own insights on this mystery in the comments below. Now, still your heart and open your mind. The veil of history is about to be torn away. Our revelation begins. You grip the dusty codex, your fingers tracing the faint lines of script that have lain undisturbed since the 4th century AD. You are holding not just a book, but a time capsule, a direct conduit to the vibrant, often chaotic, intellectual and spiritual landscape of early Christianity. A world far more diverse and decentralized than the official narratives suggest. This wasn't the monolithic, unified church you've been led to believe existed from day one. Instead, you encounter a kaleidoscope of communities, each wrestling with profound questions about the nature of God, the teachings of Jesus, and the path to salvation. The texts unearthed at Nag Hammadi, including the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and crucially, the Gospel of Mary, present a startling counter-narrative to the 4 canonical Gospels, offering radically different perspectives on Jesus' message and the roles of his disciples. They speak of inner knowledge, of a divine spark within each individual, and of a path to enlightenment that bypasses external rituals and hierarchical authority. You reflect on the tumultuous 2nd and 3rd centuries, a period of intense theological debate where the battle for what would become orthodoxy was fiercely waged. Church fathers like Irenaeus and Tertullian were actively engaged in refuting what they termed heresies, particularly those identified with Gnosticism. These Gnostics, a broad and diverse group, often emphasized a secret knowledge, gnosis, as the means to salvation, an understanding accessible not through church doctrine or sacraments, but through direct mystical experience and revelation. The Nag Hammadi texts are, for the most part, Gnostic scriptures, offering a profound challenge to the developing ecclesiastical structure that was consolidating power and defining a singular, authoritative path to God. Imagine the shock, the intellectual earthquake, as scholars began to translate these documents, revealing a Jesus who speaks in riddles and parables encouraging self-discovery and a divine feminine presence often absent from the canonical text. You are witnessing the unearthing of a parallel spiritual tradition, one that flourished for centuries before being systematically suppressed and eradicated from historical memory. From the perspective of the emerging Orthodox Church, these Gnostic teachings were dangerous. They threatened the very foundation of their burgeoning authority by suggesting that salvation was an individual journey of spiritual awakening, rather than a process mediated by priests and sacraments. For centuries, the faithful have wrestled with the question of whether the exclusion of these texts was merely a theological difference or a calculated move to control narratives and consolidate power. You consider the implications. If direct revelation was the path, what need was there for an intermediary priesthood? If the divine was within, what need was there for grand cathedrals and elaborate rituals? This very notion, amplified by texts like the Gospel of Mary, presented an existential threat to the institutionalization of Christianity. The struggle was not simply over theological nuances. It was a battle for the soul of the faith, for control over the interpretation of Christ's message, and ultimately for the hearts and minds of millions. The texts speak of Jesus engaging with his disciples in deeply esoteric conversations, revealing secrets of the cosmos and the human soul that were meant for the spiritually prepared, not necessarily for public dissemination. This concept of restricted, advanced teachings fundamentally converged from the later emphasis on universal, public doctrine. You observe the stark contrast between the Nag Hammadi scriptures and the canonical New Testament. While the canonical Gospels focus on Jesus' earthly ministry, his miracles, and his public crucifixion and resurrection as salvific events, many Gnostic texts emphasize his post-resurrection teachings, particularly those given in secret to his inner circle. They often portray the physical world as a flawed creation, a prison from which the divine spark within humanity seeks liberation. Salvation, in this context, is not achieved through belief in a historical event, but through gnosis, a direct, experiential knowledge of the true nature of God and self, transcending the material realm. The existence of these texts forces you to confront a deeply unsettling question. Was the selection of the canonical books a process guided solely by divine inspiration? Or was it influenced by the political and social agendas of the powerful men who shaped early Christian doctrine? You realize that the narrative you inherited is the victor's history, meticulously curated to present a seamless continuation from the apostles to the established church. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi library ripped a hole in that seamless fabric, revealing the discarded threads, the alternative patterns, and the voices that were deliberately silenced. One is forced to ask, how much of our understanding of early Christianity, and indeed of spirituality itself, has been shaped by what was excluded rather than what was included in the sacred text? You stand at a precipice of understanding, poised to delve deeper into one of the most provocative of these rediscovered texts, the Gospel of Mary, a document that promises to unveil a radical reinterpretation of sin, salvation, and the pivotal role of a woman whose wisdom threatened to redefine the very essence of early Christian leadership. You stand on the edge of a profound revelation, one that centers on a figure often relegated to the shadows of history. Yet who, in the early Christian movement, wielded a spiritual authority that challenged the very foundations of the emerging patriarchal church? Mary Magdalene. The Gospel of Mary, though fragmented, offers an unparalleled glimpse into her radical teachings and the intense resistance they provoked among some of the other disciples. Imagine yourself in the immediate aftermath of the resurrection, a pivotal moment of confusion and nascent understanding for the disciples. Jesus has ascended, leaving them with profound, often cryptic, instructions and an urgent mission to spread his message. But the message itself, and who best understood it, became the first great schism. The Gospel of Mary paints a portrait of Mary Magdalene not as a repentant sinner, as later traditions would falsely claim, but as a privileged disciple, one to whom Jesus confided the deepest mysteries of his teachings, mysteries that even the other apostles struggled to grasp. You witness her sitting among the grieving and bewildered disciples, her face serene, yet holding a profound inner light. She alone, it seems, possesses the clarity to guide them through their despair. Peter, the traditional leader, struggles with his grief and confusion, turning to her for comfort and perhaps for revelation. Sister, we know that the Savior loved you more than the rest of women. Tell us the words of the Savior which you remember, which you know, but we do not, nor have we heard them. This opening sets the stage for a dramatic conflict, revealing her unique closeness to Jesus and the deep well of esoteric knowledge she holds. As Mary begins to recount her visions and the private teachings Jesus imparted to her, you hear words that resonate with a profoundly different theological framework than that which would eventually become orthodoxy. Her message is not one of external redemption through sacrifice, but of internal liberation through gnosis or spiritual knowledge. She speaks of the nature of matter, the origins of sin, and the soul's arduous journey through various cosmic powers to attain true rest. The core of her teaching is revolutionary. Sin is not merely an external transgression against divine law, but an internal state of ignorance, a distortion of the soul caused by attachment to the fleeting, perishable material world. The root of sin, she explains, is attachment to matter, which is alien to the soul. This directly challenges the burgeoning notion of original sin as an inherited stain and reframes salvation as an individual process of spiritual awakening, a stripping away of ignorance and material illusion. You hear her describe Jesus' teachings on the journey of the soul after death, ascending through realms guarded by malevolent powers. Ignorance, desire, anger, fear, each representing a spiritual obstacle that must be transcended through knowledge and inner purity. The soul, she explains, must answer the challenges of these powers, asserting its divine origin and shedding the chains of matter that bind it. This spiritual ascent is a deeply personal, internal struggle, not a communal ritual or an act mediated by external authority. For Mary, true liberation comes from recognizing the divine spark within oneself and cultivating the inner wisdom, gnosis, that allows one to overcome the limitations of the physical world and the spiritual forces that seek to enslave the soul. Imagine the shock in the room, the palpable tension, as Mary delivers these profound, esoteric truths. Peter, ever the pragmatic leader, the rock upon which the institutional church would claim to be built, erupts with skepticism and barely concealed hostility. Did he really speak privately with a woman and not openly to us? Are we to turn around and all listen to her? Did he prefer her to us? His words betray not just a theological disagreement, but a deep-seated discomfort with a woman holding such preeminent spiritual authority. Andrew, too, voices his doubt, questioning the very validity of Mary's words, stating that these teachings are strange ideas. You witness the very birth of patriarchal resistance, a pattern that would tragically repeat throughout Christian history, sidelining women from positions of spiritual leadership and suppressing alternative interpretations of Jesus' message. Yet not all are against her. Levi, recognizing the profound truth in Mary's words and perhaps the jealousy underlying Peter's outburst, rises to her defense. He argues that if Jesus chose Mary, who are they to question his judgment? He reminds them that the Savior made her worthy. Levi's interjection highlights that not all within the early movement were united in their rejection of Mary's leadership or her unique understanding. This internal conflict within the Gospel of Mary serves as a microcosm of the larger historical struggle for the soul of Christianity, a struggle between a hierarchical, externalized faith and a more mystical, internalized path. You are forced to ponder. What kind of church would have emerged if Mary's teachings, emphasizing inner wisdom and individual enlightenment, had been embraced rather than suppressed? What would have been the trajectory of Christian thought if the divine spark within each individual and the radical path to inner liberation through gnosis had remained central to the faith? The suppression of the Gospel of Mary and other Gnostic texts that elevated women and emphasized inner wisdom had profound implications. It contributed to the marginalization of women in ecclesiastical roles, a marginalization that persists in many traditions to this day. It shifted the focus from an internal spiritual journey to an externalized system of dogma, ritual, and hierarchical authority. You observe how readily the nascent church, seeking unity and control in a turbulent world, embraced a more codified, authoritarian structure, one that found radical, individualized spiritual paths to be a threat to its burgeoning power. The very narrative of salvation was fundamentally altered, moving from a process of individual inner transformation to one of adherence to creed and submission to institutional decree. This deliberate shift in emphasis, influenced by powerful figures such as Peter, solidified a particular understanding of Christianity, an understanding that ultimately rendered the profound insights of figures like Mary Magdalene as heretical and dangerous. You have witnessed the seeds of discord sown, the theological and hierarchical conflicts that began to fracture the nascent Christian movement. Now you must confront the grim historical reality of their harvest, the systematic suppression and eventual erasure of entire bodies of knowledge, including texts as profound as the Gospel of Mary. This was not a passive process of theological disagreement. It was an active campaign, driven by powerful men seeking to forge a unified, institutionalized faith. Imagine the early centuries, where countless gospels, epistles, and apocalypses circulated among diverse Christian communities, each offering its own understanding of Christ's message. There was no single Bible as you know it, but a vibrant, often contradictory marketplace of ideas. The consolidation of power within the Roman Empire and its eventual adoption of Christianity as its official religion profoundly influenced the trajectory of the faith. To maintain control and ensure doctrinal uniformity across a vast empire, the church leaders sought to define a singular orthodoxy and ruthlessly eradicate anything that deviated from it. You watch as councils are convened not to debate peacefully, but to condemn. Edicts are issued not merely to clarify doctrine, but to outlaw. The very concept of heresy becomes a potent weapon used to silence dissent and justify the destruction of texts and the persecution of their adherents. The Gnostics, with their emphasis on individual revelation and a God beyond the material world, were among the primary targets. Their books were labeled dangerous, their followers deemed enemies of the true faith, and their insights systematically purged from the historical record. Consider the implications of this violent suppression. You are told that the canon of the New Testament, the 27 books deemed inspired and authoritative, coalesced naturally, guided by divine hand. Yet, historical evidence reveals a far more complex and political process. For example, Athanasius, Bishop of Alexandria, in his Easter letter of 367 AD, became the first to list precisely the 27 books that now comprise the New Testament, effectively closing the canon for many. His authority, backed by imperial power, was instrumental in solidifying this collection and simultaneously marginalizing all others. You can almost hear the crackle of flames as texts like the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, and countless others are consigned to the pyre, deemed dangerous by the very men who were shaping the future of Christianity. This was intellectual and spiritual genocide, a deliberate act to control the narrative, to dictate what was true, and to erase what was inconvenient or threatening to the established order. What was lost in this deliberate act of exclusion? You are left with a Christianity largely devoid of the divine feminine. The Gospel of Mary presented a powerful female apostle, a spiritual equal, if not superior, to many of the male disciples, holding unique insights into Jesus's most profound teaching. Her silencing contributed directly to the marginalization of women in church leadership and the development of a predominantly patriarchal theological framework that has persisted for centuries. You are forced to confront the chilling truth that the suppression of these texts didn't just remove alternate narratives. It actively shaped the very essence of Christian dogma, pushing aside concepts like inner gnosis, reincarnation, implied in some Gnostic texts, and a less judgmental understanding of sin. The focus shifted from internal transformation to external adherence, from personal spiritual journey to institutional salvation. For centuries, how many seekers, how many mystics, how many women have wrestled with the feeling that something was missing from the traditional narrative, that the full breadth of Christ's message had somehow been redacted. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi library, buried for over 1600 years, stands as a testament to the resilience of truth. It is a profound act of defiance against the forces of suppression, a glimmer of light from a forgotten age. You realize that the very act of burying these texts was an act of preservation, a desperate hope that one day, when the intellectual climate was more receptive, these radical truths could reemerge. And reemerge they have, forcing you to reevaluate everything you thought you knew about the origins of your faith. One is compelled to ask, what if these diverse voices, including the radical teachings of Mary Magdalene, had been allowed to flourish? What kind of Christianity would have evolved, unburdened by the need for rigid hierarchical control and a singular, exclusive pathway to God? Perhaps a faith more focused on individual spiritual evolution, on a personal relationship with the divine spark within, and on an inclusive understanding of truth accessible to all, irrespective of gender or social status. The implications are staggering, not just for historical understanding, but for your own spiritual journey today. The Gospel of Mary invites you to consider a path less traveled, a spirituality that emphasizes inner wisdom over external dogma, personal revelation over institutional decree. It challenges you to look beyond the accepted narratives and seek a deeper, more profound connection to the divine. You are left with a powerful, unsettling realization. The Bible you hold in your hands is not the sum total of early Christian thought, but a carefully curated selection, shaped by centuries of power struggles, theological debates, and deliberate acts of exclusion. The lost Gospels, particularly the Gospel of Mary, present not just historical curiosities, but profound spiritual challenges to contemporary understanding. They invite you to question the foundations of your beliefs, to explore the suppressed wisdom of the past, and to seek a more expansive, inclusive, and liberating understanding of the divine. The veil of history, once tightly drawn, has been torn away, revealing the vibrant, complex, and often contentious spiritual landscape of early Christianity. What will you do with this newfound knowledge? Will you dismiss it as mere historical footnote? Or will you allow it to expand your understanding of the universe, of Jesus' teachings, and of the radical power of the human spirit to connect directly with the divine? This journey into the forgotten archives of faith is not just about ancient texts. It is about seeking a more complete truth for your own soul, a truth that has long been whispered and now, finally, demands to be heard. You have voyaged through the sands of time, unearthed forgotten voices, and witnessed the profound implications of what was embraced and what was cast aside in humanity's spiritual quest. The revelation of texts like the Gospel of Mary is not merely an academic exercise. It is a profound reawakening, a testament to the resilience of truth against the tide of suppression. When the earth yields secrets buried for millennia, it is not by chance, but by a cosmic design that compels us to re-examine our foundations. You are now part of this unveiling, a witness to the profound wisdom that was deemed too revolutionary, too liberating to be widely known. The silencing of Mary Magdalene's voice and the suppression of texts that championed inner wisdom over hierarchical control shaped humanity's spiritual trajectory for centuries, creating a narrative of exclusion where one of direct connection and universal access to the divine might have flourished. But now the veil is truly torn. The echoes of these banned texts resonate with an eternal truth, that the divine spark resides within each of us, and the path to salvation is often an internal journey of gnosis. These forgotten gospels challenge you to look beyond dogma, beyond external authority, to seek the profound, intuitive understanding that Mary Magdalene herself championed. They remind us that the story of faith is far richer, far more diverse, and infinitely more liberating than the curated narratives often suggest. You are now empowered with a knowledge that transcends the conventional, a knowledge that invites you to forge your own path, guided by the rediscovery of ancient wisdom. The true legacy of these banned texts is not merely historical intrigue, but an enduring call to spiritual autonomy, urging you to unveil the divine within yourself and reclaim a more complete understanding of humanity's sacred journey.